All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very happy to see you all here for the very first event in a series we're calling Dialogues Across Difference, Building Community at MIT. So in a moment, I'll introduce our opening speaker, Dr. John Tomasi, but I'll start by briefly framing why it is we're here. So a little over a month ago, I wrote a letter to the campus community to share the statement on free expression recently approved by the MIT faculty. In that letter, I pledged that MIT would create a range of different opportunities to engage and inspire all of us to learn about, practice, and model skills to confidently, constructively, respectfully express ourselves, and to listen to each other across differences. So this event fits that bill perfectly. But I have to say, it did not just spring into being this month. Bringing our community into conversation about how we live and work together has actually been a long-time priority for Institute Community and Equity Officer John Dozier. So it feels exactly right that John will be guiding our discussion today. So John and his team have been developing this Dialogues Across Difference series for more than a year. And it is our great good fortune that the first event is ready now, and we really do need it. So to John, to everyone involved in bringing this series to life, thank you. So why does our community need this kind of conversation? I think all of you each, have your own answer to that question. And, as I'm going around on my listening tour, I'll be very interested to hear your answers to that question. But to me, I see a community of exceptionally talented and dedicated people from every background, united in wanting to live up to MIT's extremely serious mission, but somewhat disunited over a number of fundamental questions about how we should treat each other, how we should speak with each other, and generally how we should conduct ourselves as diverse members of a really intense academic community. So for many members of our community, for many individuals and groups, this disunity, this lack of mutual respect and understanding lead to all kinds of misery. And for us as a community, I believe that this discord presents an obstacle that we must overcome if we hope to live up to our mission and to achieve our full potential. So needless to say, I'm very interested in getting started. So I will now introduce our speaker. So raised in rural northern Vermont, John Tomasi grew up with deep philosophical interests. However, as he puts it, he was, quote, militantly opposed to becoming a professor or being involved in the academy in any way, precisely because he was so committed to philosophy. Now, as you'll see, he seems to have overcome his resistance, and I have to say, not at the cost of his idealism, I hope. He is a highly regarded political theorist and philosopher. Dr. Tomasi spent 27 years on the faculty at Brown, where he founded the Political Theory Project. After earning his BA from Colby, he did graduate work at the University of Arizona before earning his doctorate from Oxford. He is the author of 2 books, Liberalism Beyond Justice and Free Market Fairness. And then, in January of 2021, Dr. Tomasi gave up his tenured position at Brown to become the inaugural president of the Heterodox Academy. According to its mission statement, the Academy seeks to improve the quality of research and education in universities by increasing open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, and constructive disagreement. Dr. Tomasi has described his own vision as, quote, trying to support the best aspects of the American educational system by encouraging people to look for barriers that are preventing curiosity, that are preventing the free expression of our intellect, and that are preventing the free exploration of ideas. So in that spirit, we are delighted that he agreed to join us as the first speaker in Dialogues Across Difference. So please join me in offering a very warm MIT welcome to Dr. John Tomasi. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, President Kornbluth, and thanks to all of you for coming along this afternoon. I also want to just especially thank John again, because John Dozier again, for all the hospitality and time he's taken with me to talk about MIT, to help me get some sense for some of the personalities on the campus, encouraged me to reach out to certain people to talk with before I came onto campus to give this talk. And I'm just really grateful to him. It was an unusual experience. I'm the president of Heterodox Academy. We're an organization of research professors and some administrators all around the world. We're 5,600 strong now, but growing at a steady rate. We're professors from different disciplines, different backgrounds, who affirm three primary principles. We think within the academy, we should try to encourage our universities at their best to be places where there's open inquiry, where viewpoint diversity is celebrated and turned to good purposes, and the constructive disagreement actually happens, which means people listen to each other and learn and grow that way. We're a nonpartisan group. Our professorship is pretty much, our membership's divided pretty evenly between people who are on the left and on the right politically, but we're all people who are committed to this principle of trying to help our universities grow and to become the best versions of themselves that each might be. My talk today for you is a new one. I've written it for you at MIT, and it's about humility. I'm going to suggest that there are healing possibilities in the virtue of humility. And yet, humility is a uniquely taxing virtue. By its very nature, humility levies a toll before it can do its healing work. I'm not only going to talk about humility in the abstract, though I am a philosopher. I'm also going to apply it to some happenings on your campus. I'd like to offer some thoughts about what humility might have to teach us about 3 events at MIT. The first is recent, the faculty's passing of the MIT Statement on Free Expression and Academic Freedom last December. The second is upcoming, an April 4th debate entitled, "Should Academic DEI Programs Be Abolished?" The last is the oldest, but I'm sorry to say, it's still not the least. That's the Carlson Lecture Disinvitation. Since my talk is about humility, allow me to begin by practicing some of it myself. 2 things. First, as I mentioned, I maybe you already know, I'm not a scientist. In fact, as an undergrad, a college undergrad, I took only a handful of courses in math and science. And then the last of those classes, a class on physical chemistry, I got a B for barely. and yet here I am at MIT, given this platform, at the most famous scientific institute in the world. Second, MIT has been working on issues of free expression, which inevitably involve issues about gender, sex, and identity. Some of you may look at me and think, he's white, he's a male, and only in moments of self-flattery can I still be called middle-aged. And yet here I am at MIT, given this platform to speak with you about issues about free expression on your campus. Regarding that second point, some of you may know a week ago, when this lecture was announced, someone claiming to be from the MIT community tweeted that my being invited proves that MIT is a white supremacist institution, as they always suspected. I think that's too silly to be taken seriously. Still, humility teaches me as a non-scientist and as a non-minority to think carefully, to think well, and to try to listen to find my way. Exercising humility in these areas, all these areas, does not mean that I cannot be principled in the things that I say and believe. Indeed, I think it's all the more important to be principled precisely when addressing issues that are hot and contested. But humility suggests that there are different ways to be principled. Humility directs us to seek out and to hold to ways of being principled that are also thoughtful, maybe gentle, and even kind. I'll say more about that as I go. So my talk today is about humility, especially intellectual humility. What is it? Excuse me. Intellectual humility, I'm not really tied to this, am I? Well, I'll stay for now. Intellectual humility, I suppose, has a negative side and a positive side. By the negative side, I mean something I just mentioned. Humility is the recognition that each of us has cognitive biases, blurs on the lens through which we see the world. And humility is what makes us take seriously the views of others, because it tells us to work on the assumption that others may well know things that we don't know, or that we don't know well enough. Humility helps us remember that we might learn something by listening carefully to other people who may have lessons to help us know better and to learn better ourselves. That negative aspect of humility is tied to its positive dimension. In this aspect, it is humility that drives us to learn, to ask questions, to explore, and to seek to discover new things. In the realm of science, think of the great psychologist William James's description of a newborn baby human, how a newborn baby experiences the world. Quote, "A blooming and buzzing confusion." Truly great researchers in every field carry that sense of wonder with them throughout their careers. They continue to see the world that way, as a constellation of riddles to be solved, even as their own scholarly stars rise. This aspect of humility comes from a recognition of how fantastically complex, how wondrous the world around us is, as we contemplate the possibilities of discovery, new concepts and paradigms, fresh technologies, whole disciplines of study yet to be discovered or even conceived. It is humility that sparks our curiosity and our drive to engage with the most basic problems of research. To anyone with an open mind, there is always another mysterious bloom or a distant buzz out there, another piece of confusion to explore and to unwind. There is a through line, I think, that goes from intellectual humility through freedom of expression out to scientific and scholarly excellence. All three hang together on that line. It is a line well worth contemplating. Now, I'm not claiming that the world's greatest scientists, including the faculty here at MIT, are always best known by the public for their personal humility. I enjoy the epitaph on Sir Isaac Newton's grave, which some of you may know. Quote, "Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night. God said, 'Let Newton be,' and all was light." That ain't no humble pie. Still, there's an antonym of humility, arrogance, that closes one's mind. Arrogance in this context is a kind of decision, or perhaps a disposition, to close oneself to the possibility of learning from others, huddling oneself up, or huddling with like-minded others, and opposing any outsider who would invite you to think anew. This antonym of humility, arrogance, carries special challenges when we address social and moral questions, including, most especially perhaps, questions about race and inclusion and justice. In that context, opening your mind to the ideas of others may seem a kind of betrayal. Opening your mind to the ideas of others, even for a minute, people who you've been told in advance are on the other team, may seem like a mistake, a failure of solidarity, especially when the stakes are this high. But I would remind you that this is a university, a very special place and a very special time in your lives, you as students and you as faculty and you as staff too, all of us together. If you close yourself off from listening and learning while you are here, when and where else in your life do you think you will learn and listen? But what about MIT and the search for truth at this great university? Let me turn to the three cases I mentioned. First, and they start easy. First, the MIT faculty statement on free expression and the faculty report. Regarding the MIT statement, the MIT faculty passed a resolution on December 21st last year. Under the leadership of your new president, Sally Kornbluth, work is now underway about how to implement it. The MIT statement and the report are remarkable documents. True, as at least one undergrad has pointed out, the report is also long, 56 pages. And in places, like the section where the committee dreams up imaginary cases and applies its principles to them, it's pretty dense. I mean, I'm a philosopher, and I was like saying, what? They were I recognize nerds when I see them, and these are my fellow nerds just nerding out for whatever, a few pages there. No offense to the committee. Nevertheless, by any measure, the MIT statement and report are remarkable documents. They're thoughtful, they're nuanced. I've read a great number of such reports from other universities. In my opinion, the MIT statement on free expression and the report are now the gold standard in this area. As MIT begins the work of implementing this statement, what might humility say to us and to you? To those who wrote the report and who voted in favor of the statement, I think humility would urge you to focus your attention on those members of the MIT community who did not support the resolution, who did not feel yet delight or pride in this hallmark accomplishment of MIT. And there were many of them. Faculty who voted against, of course, and members of the staff, and many students too. Humility would urge you to ask yourselves, who are they? What might they have to teach you now? And what further service might you now render MIT from here, going forward, to bring the whole of MIT more fully into this covenantal process? And what about those of you who opposed the statement and who perhaps worry about the process going forward? What would humility have to say to you? I've heard that opposition came not just from some faculty, but also from some other members of the community who were designated partners to the process, but who had no vote. If you're one of those people, what might humility say to you? The social activist Verna Myers has a popular slogan about DEI. And last fall, Rushika Toyashian gave a talk at MIT where she repeated Myers' slogan and added a completing line. The first two parts from Myers go, quote, "Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance." And Toyashian added a third, "Equity is sharing in the planning of the party." I'm not sure that is what equity is. To me, it sounds something more like direct democracy, having a share of the planning of the party. Still, it is an arresting formulation. It has a power about it that draws one in if you have ears to hear. It's no surprise to me to have heard that some members of the MIT community find it inspiring. And yet this formulation leaves us with the most important question unanswered. What does it mean to have a share in the planning of the party. In the context of a university campus, the answer is not as simple as it might seem. In a little history now, if I may. In 1896, Jane Stanford, who with her recently deceased husband Leland had just founded Stanford University, was very unhappy with a professor at her university. The Stanfords were ardent Republicans, and they had made much of their wealth in the railroads. The professor, Edward Ross, was a vocal Democrat. Among other causes, including free silver, Ross was famous for criticizing the employment practices of the railroads. Indeed, Ross was best known for his tagline, quote, a railroad deal is a railroad steal. Incensed, Mrs. Stanford directed Stanford's first president, David Starr Jordan, to fire this troublesome professor. President Jordan, by every account, was a sincere advocate of academic freedom. Jordan had made numerous public statements advocating and defending that value. Still, after 4 years of mounting pressure, President Jordan acquiesced. He fired Professor Ross. In the aftermath, 2 other Stanford professors quit, and along with John Dewey, helped found the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors. In 1915, now coming around to you again, in 1915, the AAUP released a now classic report. The topic was academic freedom and the purpose of the modern university. The report distinguished fiduciary trusts from public trusts. Some universities were founded by benefactors to promote specific religious or technical purposes, fiduciary trust. But modern universities, like Stanford, were evolving under their own power in some new ways. Modern universities, with their commitment to pursue the truth through specialized knowledge, have a unique and a special role to play in service to our society, the pursuit of truth. Because of this special mission, the modern university needed to be independent of competing interests and forces. But how? According to the report, the surest way to protect open inquiry was through the doctrine of faculty self-governance. The key decisions within a modern university, decisions about hiring, promotion, curriculum, and basic university policies, must be held primarily by the faculty, since the faculty are the only parties with the specialized knowledge to keep the university on its truth-tracking path. Other members of the university community, alumni, staff, students, may properly be given voice, but the power to decide should rest primarily with the faculty. Now, I'm not saying that the AAUP thesis is impregnable. The ideal of faculty governance, faculty self-governance, has often been challenged by wealthy benefactors, by angry alums, by well-meaning students, by staff, by townspeople, and by outside organizers too. Indeed, that core AAU principle, that academic freedom is best protected by faculty self-governance, is today facing a direct challenge in Florida via Bill 999. Politicians, some of you I'm sure are following this case, politicians and citizens, having lost faith in the commitment of public universities to balance and open inquiry, are now, it seems, stepping in and may displace the faculty at those universities from their governing roles. It is a fascinating moment, but that's a different conversation. Here's a lesson, though, for humility now with that background. As MIT moves forward, implementing the recommendations of the report, there is a lesson here for anyone who believes that equity requires that they be given a seat at the planning of the party. What kind of seat are you seeking? What kind of seat should you seek? If it is a seat in the sense of being accorded an opportunity for input and voice as a partner, then the AAUP statement is with you. But if instead you believe that you and other university partners, alums, staff, and students, should be given the power to write the basic rules of university life, then you should do well to be aware of this history, whatever you decide about it in the end. If you think that equity means students should take a share of power from the faculty on these basic questions, what other groups might be next able to make the same claim? Do you really believe that your university would long remain true to its truth-seeking mission if all these other groups pulled up seats at the table and took up power along with you, or perhaps against you? And if they did, what makes you think that the university, perhaps pulled off its truth-seeking mission, would then turn in whichever particular direction you want it to go? Humility would counsel you to think twice or thrice about that question. But here again, humility generates further lessons for the faculty proponents of the statement too. Even if decision-making power does properly rely with the faculty, again, that's the AAUP thesis, currently being questioned in lots of interesting, powerful ways. But even if that decision-making power does primarily rest with the faculty, what does that mean for you on the faculty to adequately offer representation and voice to your fellow members of the MIT community? As MIT moves forward with implementing the statement on free expression, I think humility would urge you to bring in others from the community, especially students, as fully and as genuinely as possible. Remain principled in your defense of free expression. This, I believe, is your public trust. Still, seek to be principled in a way that draws people in rather than turns them away. You are teachers, so seek creative and inspiring ways to teach. The MIT Free Expression Statement may win a stronger and more lasting place on this campus if other parties, skeptical parties, are given genuine voice in the planning of the dance. Humility reminds us it is through listening to others that we learn. Second, my second case, your second case. The DEI, on April 4th, a debate on DEI. It has a pyrotechnic title, quote, "Should academic DEI programs be abolished?" Some people I've heard, some people on campus, have expressed concern about the framing of this event. One prominent person, who is here in this room, has described it as resting on, quote, "an utterly false binary of diversity, equity, and inclusion versus merit, fairness, and equality," close quote. Before addressing that event, allow me to make a few brief suggestions about what an ideal debate or an ideal university event on a complex, difficult topic might look like. I would suggest that a well-formed debate, a well-formed event on a campus that would be a debate or an event that would be designed in such a way that it could reach out and draw people in would have two guiding principles in its formation. Those principles would be, it would strive to be organic, and it would strive to be porous. By organic, I mean such an event should be known to be derived and springing from the people in your own community. It should be from this place, from you, the people who are on MIT's campus now. And the more organic events are, the more the events come from the place, the more likely it may be that they'll achieve the second aspect too, the second ideal too, of being porous. By porous, I mean an event should be crafted in such a way that any person on the campus, any member of the community, would feel welcome walking into that room, would feel that there was something there for them to learn, that this was a university event, a public event, something shared by all of us. That's hard to get to. You don't just get that immediately. You don't get there like in a moment, in a flash. You don't get there just by the way you pick speakers, though that's part of it. You don't get there just by the topic you choose, though that's part of it. You get there in part by working as a community over time to prepare the ground such that things will start to grow up. And when they grow up, they won't immediately be seen as attack weeds by some and my flowers by others. You have to prepare the ground through time to create the conditions in which special events like that might happen. So I just want to mention that to you as an ideal going forward. Something about trying to keep events, try to make events follow those two principles. They're complicated, but they're beautiful, I think. Being organic and something like being porous. Still, that background work on every campus always remains to be undone. It always remains undone. The soil's never right. I'm a somewhat gardener, and I know you've got to always work the soil. It never ends. The event that's going to happen on this campus in 2 weeks, what about it? What do we say now? You know the soil better than I do. You know the conditions better than I do. I'm aware of some of the details about the event, how MIT faculty hope to participate, and I know some of that. You all know it better than I do. But given the event that's happening in about 2 weeks, what would humility say to us? I think humility would say to you, go to the event. Maybe you will go to protest civilly. But I think humility would urge you to go, but with your eyes and your ears wide open. One way to make a good debate great is to pose intelligent questions about its framing assumptions. On that approach, if you see a clear intellectual opportunity, an intellectual opportunity, you may discover a chance to teach some humility yourself. But however that may be, humility would urge you to go along to this campus event and to seek out lessons, ones intended by the event's speakers and organizers, and ones unforeseen even by them, on whatever side and from whatever direction you might find them. And I can't resist noting that I understand that Nadine Strawson, my friend, is going to be moderating the debate. Nadine has forgotten more about free speech controversies than I or most people I know have ever known. So even if you find no other reason to go along to see Nadine in action. You will find it difficult not to learn something important from her. Last but not least, my third case. I have no idea how long I've been talking. Oh. Last but not least, the Carlson Lecture disinvitation. Is there anything about this incident that has not already been said? I'm not sure. I haven't heard the whole debate. I've just been catching up, watching it from afar. But I suspect that humility might yet have something to teach us here. Let me say clearly at the outset, putting my cards on the table for you, I believe that the decision to disinvite the Carlson lecturer was a mistake. I mentioned a moment ago that 100 years ago, a Stanford president made the mistake of firing a professor for expressing an unpopular viewpoint. But the process of collapsing that free speech tent at Stanford took 4 years. About the Carlson incident, I still often hear people say that in the age of Twitter, it took only 8 days to bring the greatest scientific institute in the world to its knees. Still, I think humility would urge us to look back on the Carlson events with some understanding. During a period when America was convulsed with questions of race, a speaker was invited to give the Carlson lecture. That speaker then published an op-ed that expressed a view about the primacy of merit against DEI. And in the final paragraph of that op-ed, he offered an historical comparison to the fate of German universities under the horror that was National Socialism. That paragraph is historically accurate, but in my opinion, it did not help the medicine go down. And what's more, as you all know, this wasn't just any lecture. The Carlson lecture has a special outward-facing function. The Carlson lecture is an invitation to high school students and others to the world of exploration and discovery that is MIT, that is so distinctively MIT. Still, I believe, in hindsight, that this invitation was clearly wrong. And its wrongness and the damage it has caused MIT, and I'm sorry to say, continues to cause MIT, is compounded precisely by the factor that, to some, seemed at first to justify the decision that the Carlson lecture has a special public-facing function. More than any other lecture. For that reason, the Carlson lecture says to the rising generation of scientists, this is MIT. With this lecture, perhaps more than any other, MIT has a reason to be sure that its values are clear for all to see. What an opportunity to demonstrate what a commitment to free expression and bold, creative discovery might mean. Like many moments of crisis and confusion on college campuses, that was potentially a teaching moment. As it unfolded in real time, perhaps we can at least think it was a learning moment. It was an opportunity for MIT to declare to the world its most basic principles. And I do fear that the wrong message was sent. So here we are. To quote Lenin, what is to be done? My last sip and my last page. In our terms, what would humility say should be done? One possibility, which I've heard from some people, and I'm sure you have too, is that the university should apologize for what happened. I'm not sure what to say about that. One ratchet down, though, from an apology would be to say that the university should simply acknowledge that a mistake was made. This seems to me has more to it than the apology side. After all, it was a tense and challenging moment. And with the faculty statement not yet written and in place, perhaps the institutional guidelines were not sufficiently clear. The institutional values were not sufficiently clear. Perhaps now, with that MIT free expression statement formulated and ratified, troubles like these are forever behind you. But history teaches us otherwise. A challenge will come when you're least ready for it. And as the pressures mount, what makes you think that you will remain strong? I'm an outsider, and I'm going to and I'm going to close with a suggestion. I'm going to suggest a forward-looking approach, just to add to the hopper of the many dozens or hundreds of suggestions and people that have made to you. I'm going to suggest a forward-looking approach, and President Kornblith, with sincere humility and respect, I hope you'll just consider making a public declaration that this will never happen again. A forward-looking declaration. Indeed, there are opportunities, growing perhaps, because of this situation, to use the now special platform and symbolism of the Carlson Lecture to demonstrate to the rising generation of scientists and to the whole world that the spirit of discovery and open inquiry, even when it is difficult, even when it's challenging, remains the very heart of MIT. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Please join me once again in thanking John for his words and his insights. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Ooh, good point. Or it's mine.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. You're both a friend and a scholar. There we go. Okay. So I have to say that I'm struck by the whole notion of humility. When I often talk with the MIT community, I often use these three principles, if you would, as kind of the foundation for how we might build a really strong community. Critical engagement with each other, civil discourse, and empathy.
Yeah.
But when I think about that, and all of that, using all of that really for the sake of building trust, which ultimately is what's needed. But when I think about empathy, empathy is really kind of looking at the world through someone else's lens and not your own. And I really appreciated thinking about humility as you were offering it, because it's really more inward work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
Can I just say that?
Sure.
I think that's exactly right. Empathy is this call to look out and see others, see ourselves in others, to realize that we have a part in their lives and they have a part in our lives. It's a Rousseauian idea, but it comes from other places too. But humility does have that different orientation, where it asks us first to look at ourselves for what we might do. And it's motivated by some pretty deep things. It's motivated by an awareness that, we need others to complete us and to move us forward together. But I do think empathy, in some ways, comes after humility, maybe. Maybe that's not right, but something like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. So as we get started, I'd like to share a bit with you about why we invited you to MIT today. First, we invited you because we wanted to hear what you have to say, and we've absolutely heard that. When you and I spoke on Zoom last fall and more recently, it was really clear to me that your work and your ideas needed to be heard and needed to be shared, that people here would benefit from hearing them. I so appreciate you coming here today and doing that, and I want to take a moment just to thank John Chisholm, who's in the audience with us today, who was actually the first person to connect us, and so thank you, John, for that. Second, MIT has spent a lot of time and energy over the past few years creating plans and projects to improve our sense of community on campus. We've produced a new values statement, a strategic action plan for belonging, achievement, and composition, a faculty statement on free expression and academic freedom, and a number of other reports that are intended for us to help us to see each other, connect with one another, and improve our collective experience. Now, I'm not going to ask you to opine on the specifics of any of these things. They're really MIT's work for us to do for itself. Instead, I'd like for us to talk about what's really driving this kind of work here and at other schools. I want to know how we can encourage open discussion, especially on challenging topics, so we can most effectively honor our commitments to improving community and optimizing our ability to being the institution described in our mission statement. So really, I want to kind of start with you with your work with the Heterodox Academy. I recognize that it's active on college campuses across the United States at this point. What have you seen other campuses do effectively to bring their communities into conversation with one another?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Thank you. So HXA, as we call ourselves, we're all around the world. We're in 58 countries, 49 states, not yet in Hawaii. I'm saving that for next February to go convince one person to join us there. And the way we work is through the individuals join when they affirm the three principles that I mentioned before, and we connect them in a couple different ways. And the communities do different kinds of things. We have a big set of virtual communities, which are some of them are based on geography. So there's an HXA New York City, there's an HXA California, there's an HXA New Zealand, there's an HXA Sweden, and more. We also have, interestingly, perhaps to many of you, on virtual communities that are based on disciplines. So there's an HXA Economics, HXA Social Science, HXA Psychology, Biology. There's various STEM ones now growing too. We're making a big move into STEM starting this last winter. So we have all these online communities that connect people. And then the final thing, getting closer to your question, in January we launched a new initiative of campus communities. And we invited applications from our membership all around the world to create campus communities on their own campuses of professors who are interested in these values. Some are skeptical of the values, some love the values, they're all over the place, as our membership tends to be. But they're curious about these values and how to integrate them with the wider concerns that they have and that their campuses have. We picked 20, we planned to do 4 or 5 pilot campuses this semester, but we were just flooded with so many great applications that we picked 23 that we just launched, 23 pilot campuses. Some are at research universities like here at MIT, at UC Berkeley, Johns Hopkins, many others. Some are at big state schools, the University of Kentucky. Some are at community colleges, Lynn Benton Community College. So all different kinds of universities and campuses out there that are building these communities. The experiment's young. On the campuses so far, we have seedlings growing. When I speak to the organizers of these communities, I say to them, you might think of yourselves as putting up a flag for free expression on your campus. And to some degree, they are doing that. But what I try to encourage them to think instead of themselves as doing is putting up a trellis in the middle of their own distinct campus garden in the hopes that things will grow there and things will come to it, join in, make it their own unique thing in different places. So one thing that I find, and again, we're just beginning this new experiment, but I believe what I was saying to you when I was speaking before about organicity. I think finding ways to prepare the soil so that people can feel that they own the events that happen on their campuses. That's just one of the absolute most important things. There can be things added to campus from people who aren't on the campus. I get that. But if you have a base of organicness, that affects the way people come, it affects the way they listen, it often affects the way events are structured. I can say more about that if you like, but I don't know what you want me to do.
Well, you kind of spoke about that, organic and porous, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll say it. So I'll give an example from my own experience. When I was at Brown, I had this incredible conversation with these 2 students, who a junior and a senior, one a very prominent Democrat, one a very prominent Republican, who came to me because they wanted to create a lecture series that would have different sides of a debate brought together. I've heard that before from students. I've taught a long time. But what they said to me, one of them said to me, was really strange. He said, listen, he said to me, we did not come to campus merely to become more skillful defenders of any inherited ideology. They didn't come to campus to become skillful defenders of some inherited idea. So why did they come? They came because they thought, as young people, that they could know more than us. They can see the world we adults have made, and they think, well, we can do something better. We can do something more. And they come to campus hoping that they'll have opportunities to do that. And these two students helped me build this organization, which was founded on these ideas of organicness and porosity. And one thing I'll say about it that you may find interesting, they decided when they launched their lecture series to not do it themselves. Instead, they made a rule: any student group on campus that claimed to have an interest in politics could have one representative on a steering committee that would meet every other Sunday night in some basement room on campus. I would provide pizza or Chinese food to lure them to the site. And they would go there and they would decide what lecture topic, what lecture structure, what kind of thing would be appropriate for Brown at that time. And that group, with these people, gave up power, right, to their fellow colleagues, to their community. They had reps from the Democrats and the Republicans, the 16 lefty groups at Brown, the Students for Liberty, why not, sprinkled in too, the Gay, Lesbian, Transsexual Alliance, the College Hill for Christ. These groups got together, Hillel, Arab students, they would get together and have these conversations. So again, it's an example of organic. And once they were organic, they were bound to try to make events porous. I guess I've said those terms enough that you remember them. T-shirt, organic, porous.
And I'm sure we can make an equation out of it.
I'm sure you could. As I said, B.
Well, at MIT, we're committed to the value of free expression. We're equally committed to the value of belonging, or at least at a minimum, fostering an environment that's free from harassment and discrimination.
Of course.
What advice do you have for us as we try to strike that balance? And maybe how do you define protected speech or hate speech?
Yeah. I guess my advice would be to try not to think of it as a conflict. There is harassment, but harassment and expression are almost always pretty easily distinguishable. Not always, but in the wide variety of cases, they are easily distinguishable. You have violations. I've read some of your student code of conduct. There are violations for harassment that are clearly defined, fairly clearly defined in your handbook. And harassing behaviors like stalking or shouting slurs at someone or desecrating some religious property on campus, these are, or delivering threats. These are violations of free speech. There are attacks on people's rights that free speech, no free speech documents, at least in the U.S. context, gives any comfort to. So I think there's that. That's sort of a slightly technical answer. But I think the broader issue that is raised, and that you ask it raises, is this. I think that more energy should be spent on asking ourselves not what coercive powers might properly be wheeled out to prevent expression from happening, but rather what positive cultural tools could we emphasize and magnify on a campus to make the free expression of ideas genuinely beneficial to all of us. Focusing on that positive mission, focusing on how to make free speech, properly legal free speech, stronger and better able to serve its purpose. That's a more important and more fruitful field to, sorry, my metaphors have forgotten. It's a fruitful field to hoe. Looking for those restrictions, trying to think, how do you prevent the bad stuff? I get that. But I think instead, turning that realm of freedom allowed by free speech in ways that picks up some things President Cornbluth said in a video that I watched recently, thinking about what our rights are, but what are our obligations? And obligations aren't just yours or mine. Obligations arise within the social context. The university can foster senses of obligation. The university can do things to foster a willingness or a desire or an ambition or a hunger on the part of each of you to make your campus a better place where people can more easily and with more confidence and more trust learn from each other. And I think that's where the energy belongs. I don't mean to dodge the question on the legal one. When Nadine comes in a week or two, she'll slice and dice that if you want it. But I think the other place is more important, and it's neglected.
Thank you. Last question that I have before I turn it over to the audience. It's my experience that people are talking at or to each other rather than with one another. Maybe most especially when it comes to complex issues like meritocracy, race, gender, free expression. Let's hold on to the issue of talking for a second. I guess the question that I have is, what's the best way to get people to listen more closely to one another?
I wish I knew the answer to that question. It's kind of what HXA is all about. The third of our triumvirate about we do open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, constructive disagreement. And by the way, viewpoint diversity does not by any means only mean left-right ideologically. It means all the viewpoints that people bring onto a campus with them. But that third virtue, constructive disagreement, is a difficult skill. There are organizations that provide materials that help us understand the cognitive biases that we have. Even when we want to find ways to open our minds, wanting it ain't enough. There are actually skill sets we need to learn and practice as individuals and within communities to be able to listen to one another better. Constructive disagreement is not just something that you can say you want to do and then do it once you commit to it. It's kind of the beginning of a lifelong practice. And I think on the college campuses, among the most important things we're doing here is initiating people, if we're willing to, if we're brave enough to, if we're committed enough to community to do these steps, to help us take seriously what it means to listen to people who see the world differently than we do. I know it's not easy. It's easy to say it's easy, especially in the face of a Carlson situation, I understand. But that's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to do something that's more challenging than most of us recognize. No wonder we get it wrong. But once we start to see how difficult it is, this thing we're engaged in, we'll up our games, perhaps. And only then, perhaps, can we get better at it. So I would say the first thing about listening and speaking is realizing and admitting how unnatural it is for us, how difficult it is, but also how important it is, and therefore you're going to need to work, each of us forever, on trying to become able to do it.
Which is almost the exercise in humility.
Yeah, it is humility. That's a big part of it.
So I think it's important for us to turn the microphones over to you. As you can see, there are mic stands that are in the aisle. If you have a question and can't get to the aisle, of course, just raise your hand and we'll make sure and get the mic to you. Just a little reminder before we start. As I said earlier, John isn't here to do our work for us. If you have a question that is maybe MIT specific, I want you to come and find me right after the talk. Maybe find someone on the first couple of rows.
Sorry. Ultimately, it's going to go to you.
No, come and find me. Put it on me. John is an expert on many things, but the details of MIT probably aren't one of them, despite your amazing preparation for today. And lastly, please keep your questions brief. We want to make sure that we have the time to hear as many people as possible. And I don't see anyone moving to the, okay.
The first mover.
The first mover.
Thank you. This is a really fascinating and important talk.
Thank you.
I have a question about what you might have learned about building our capacity to take in people's emotions as they are expressing their views about things in free speech. One of the things I've learned, managing different groups of people in different settings here at MIT and beyond is, people bring different styles of expressing themselves that can push other people's buttons, if you will.
Yeah.
And what have you learned in the process of your work that might help us build that capacity?
Wow. I mean, I guess I was surprised when I first started realizing and reading some literature about this, that the way we respond is not the way our brains, as a philosopher, a trained philosopher, thinks we respond. And there are articles about this in evolutionary biology and other places too, that talk about how, what we think we're thinking and how we think the rider of the elephant is going to be in charge are often not what's actually moving us. We get moved by other kinds of things. I actually found those literatures kind of terrifying when I first read about them, to almost exactly the same degree that I found the literature of philosophy thrilling. Here's a way I can start solve one of the problems of the world. This was when I was 20 years old or something. Then I started reading that literature and I was like, oh wow. So no matter how much logic I get, my brain's still gonna take me off on some emotional reaction. So I don't really have a lot to say to you about that, except that, I will just, again, mentioning Heterodox Academy, we have a lot of, the thing HXA has, and President Cornblath mentioned, I left my beloved endowed position at my beloved university to take this job because of the incredible asset, the most incredible asset HXA has, which is our almost now 6,000 professor members. That group is constantly adding ideas and concepts into our website and into our library. So there's a rich source there. We're about to launch a new website. In fact, thanks to the generosity of an MIT alum who's not in this room here, but someone who heard about us and saw how terrible our website was and said, listen, you got to do better than that. But there are resources there that address that question in more sophisticated ways than I could do off the cuff. But I will emphasize, I'll highlight how important it is. Understanding the kind of creatures we are it shakes us up from the idea of thinking that we know the kind of creatures we are. And once you realize we don't really know who we are very well, then it opens up new possibilities for doing things with each other, perhaps. Thanks for asking that.
I have to say that this also reminds me.
I should be briefer.
No.
Okay.
You're great.
Okay.
You're great.
No.
I was thinking, I was listening about 3 o'clock this morning to my favorite podcast, Hidden Brain.
Ouch.
I couldn't go to sleep. I don't know why.
You're so excited about this lecture.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Come on. Work with me.
Yeah. Sean Kirby-Dunton was actually talking about something like this, so maybe
really?
the current episode of Hidden Brain might give you a little insight. Please.
Hello, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today. I can't help but feel that your statement on the Carlson lecture that the controversy brought the greatest scientific institution in the world to its knees was slightly reductive. It is the greatest scientific institution in the world because of the people who work here, and particularly the students, and these are the ones who initiated the disinvitation of the lecture. To some graduate students, the invitation of this particular lecture felt like the last straw in a series of discriminatory and disrespectful behavior in the department that they had experienced themselves. So, how do you weigh off demonstrating to the world that open inquiry remains at the heart of MIT, which is done in many other ways as well, with demonstrating to the students that MIT cares about and respects their opinions, their identities, their humanity, and their ability to express themselves?
Yeah.
As a philosopher, how do you weigh off these apparently contradictory dimensions of free expression?
Is it okay if thanks for the question. I guess the answer that I try to bring out some machinery that might be helpful toward that question. This idea from the AAUP that there's some reason why faculty are given a certain set of prerogatives, and that grad students, for example, are not given those same prerogatives. So that's going to be a piece of it. It doesn't answer the substantive question about how, and you talked about the last straw, and I know I'm aware of some of the departmental complications. I don't know exactly what you meant by that, and maybe that's not relevant to what you're asking me. Can you sharpen it for me again? I'm sorry. Just is your concern about defending the Carlson lecture? What were you? Tell me exactly.
So the grad students felt discriminated against in their department through actions that the faculty had taken, et cetera, and
Those are the straws.
yeah, those were the straws, and this felt like the last straw, which led to action on the part of the graduate students to oppose the lecturer being invited, because it felt like a very public representation of all of the values that they wanted to uphold that were being honestly disrespected by their faculty and MIT as an institution as a whole, because it conflicted with their ability to express themselves and feel respected within the context of their department. And from the students that I've spoken to who are part of this effort, standing up to the Carlson Lecture invitation was their way of demonstrating, their way of asserting themselves essentially that their needs were as important as potentially the needs of MIT to invite this particular person to the lecture.
Thank you.
So the question is, given free expression in the institution and the needs to like uphold the MIT values inside of MIT versus upholding the values outside of MIT, if these seem like conflicting objectives, how do you resolve that issue?
Thank you. I do not know the history of the department that you're talking about, so I can't speak to that. I would just point out, if I may, that grad students do not own the university. They don't get to speak for the university. They don't get to say what MIT is. They should have input, important input, but they don't get to make that decision. When I said at the Carlson Lecture this invitation was a mistake, I meant that the people who made the decision made a mistake. And how that plays into the history, I don't really know.
Please.
Yeah, hi. So I wanted to start by saying thank you for having this conversation and beginning the talk about free speech and academic freedom at MIT. I believe that on April 4, we're going to continue this conversation. And let me just say that everyone in the MIT community is welcome to join the conversation about DEI, because that'll be the first debate, but not the last. And regarding DEI, I want to go back to a story that you told about those students who come to an institute not to learn an ideology, but to be able to learn how to think and how to be good scientists. And how do we achieve that when colleges around the nation are instituting DEI mandates for hiring of faculty, for getting grant agreements? This has become a trend to ask people to sign up to an ideology that they may or may not believe in. How does that line up with, or how do you think about that?
You asked a couple of different things. Are you asking about the DEI statements that people write when they are being hired?
Yes.
So HXA has not taken an official position on this. I will tell you that, in my view, there's an incredible variety of ways the statements are written. I think it's quite reasonable for a university to say to people that they want to know whether they have certain kinds of commitments to certain ideals that are important to that university. That, to me, seems quite reasonable. It's widely done for all different kinds of historical examples and also different kinds of topics. But there's something different and uniquely objectionable when people are required to make a statement that seems to have a political valence built into it, especially on a controversial political valence. An organization like a university that requires a statement of candidates for a job that asks them to respond to a question has a special obligation to demonstrate that they're not applying criteria that are political or that are secretly political. I worry that some universities have fallen short of that ideal, whether in their actual practice or in their failure to take up that heavy responsibility of demonstrating clearly that there's not bias being showed. I've served on committees, I've chaired committees, hiring committees at Brown. I chaired one the year before I left, a year ago. I'm aware of some of the things that candidates go through when they're faced with what they see as uncertain ground. It's a difficult area, and I think that forcing political speech is objectionable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our provost.
Oh, Chancellor.
I'm sorry, Chancellor, forgive me.
I don't need another job, John.
Maybe most especially that one, right?
Don't tell me.
Got it.
All right, John, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed the talk. I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction, in part just to build off of the humility and community and thinking forward, looking forward, and discuss many ways in which these are quite emotional topics and people bring a lot to them. And I wonder what role forgiveness has to play in this. That sometimes conversations can begin if people are a bit more generous and just forgiving in their disposition. So, meaning that if someone says something that you find offensive, that you may find space to forgive. And that if you say something, you would expect someone would be forgiving of you, that the conversations need not all end in war, and that they can also just be perhaps continuations, even when they're things that are deeply held, right, and seem utterly obvious and certainly right.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if you would say a bit about where forgiveness and self-forgiving, people forgiving themselves.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really interesting concept. The answer I'm going to give you might not be the one you expected, but I'll just say what I'm thinking about it. Forgiveness is an incredibly important human virtue. I would just say that on the university campus, you need to have forgiveness among humans wherever they may be, no doubt. But in the university campus, when a person makes a statement that you find challenging or offensive or worrying in some profound way, I think the proper thing for us to do in a university is to try to translate that moment not into one of the moral virtues, but into intellectual virtues. I think our obligation and our challenge set before us at a university is to take the statement or the person you're communicating with and ask them, what did you mean? Approach them like investigators, like detectives, not like priests yet. Forgive them later when they fail to teach you anything, though you've seriously tried. But from the statement they make, I sort of feel like moving to forgiveness too soon might be a mistake. Better to leave them out there where they are, because that's where you might learn from them. Don't move them off it right now. This is my view. Don't move them off it right now. Recognize they're there. Try to fix them there with a question. See what they really mean when they say that. Did they say it the right way? Did they get that right? What could they have meant could they say it in a better way? Even a more challenging way? But I think our impulse on campus should not be towards emotion. Though I talked about humility, I think humility belongs in the academy in a fundamental way, as I said. But I think other kinds of virtues are always going to be important, but ancillary. Their hard work is to translate people's statements and comments and posters and everything else they do into intellectual grist for our mills. That's how I see it.
Thank you, John. Please.
I'm going to tire you guys out.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to make one comment. I'm going to go back, unfortunately. Sorry, Melissa. Just given the concept of humility in the second half of your title, with Carlson, I don't think of it as a disinvitation. The Dorian Abbott did come to campus. It was a change in the place, the manner, and the time of the speech, which, in our free speech statement is there. If you go to the Chicago Principles, it's there. At the time that the invitation was, as you called, disinvited, it was not. It was just changed. It was moved to on campus over here. I actually attended it. I was in the audience there. The manner changed, the venue changed, the time changed, but it was not a disinvitation. You called on our president to say we would never do this again. Right. We should say we would never do this again. To me, that implies actually a conflict with humility. It's sort of saying, I admit I will never make a mistake again. I do think we make mistakes, and I think humility brings with it the necessity of being able to say, yes, we made a mistake. Whether we made a mistake on Carlson or not is going to be a conflicted topic on this campus, as you can imagine. You're going to hear people on both sides. But I think even going forward, having this notion that we will never do something again seems against the concept or in direct conflict with humility. To me, humility implies that sometimes we can stand up and say, yes, I'm sorry, I made a mistake and I need to change what I'm doing because I have the humility to step back and realize I made that decision. So I was wondering how, for yourself, how do you say, I'm never going to do something, yet say we should have humility? Because to me, those two are in direct conflict.
Yeah, thank you. I've heard a number of variations on what you were saying, that denying that the Carlson lecture involved a disinvitation. I don't think that's plausible from what I understand of the facts. I've heard a number of variations on that theme. I'm aware that another invitation was made. I'm also aware that another university held an event on the exact same day and hour. I know all that. At least I know some of that. I don't find any of that plausible. A person was invited to give a lecture, and that person was told he would not be able to give that lecture. That's a disinvitation. I don't mean to be mean about that. That just seems to be a fact. About humility, you're pushing at something really hard, and I think it's really important. Humility can appear that it's going to be at war with principle. I want to say there are principles that we follow, and that part of being principled, doing principled things well, is borrowing from humility so we can do that better. But if we're committed to a principle, like the importance that the university is about truth-seeking above all else, or that we're here to learn from one another, those are principles. I think it's true by standing by a principle. There's an arrogance behind that, or maybe the arrogance isn't the right word, but there's a certain stubborn commitment. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But I think there's space in this world for things that humility does not wash away. I think of humility as a kind of a corrosive that can eat away at a lot of the bad pieces about ourselves, our unwillingness to admit we made a mistake, Carlson, the unwillingness to see these things as they are, unwilling to take them as most of the world sees them, even people who are serious about them. But principle has its own special place. And I think principle, if it comes up to conflict with humility, I'm not sure what to say about that, but I think principles are the more important of the two. I probably didn't answer your question very well.
Please.
I have a question about the practical, logistic, even a little bit boring aspects of facilitating the good kind of disagreement. So the first part is like following up on John Dozier's question about how do you facilitate people listening, and even going beyond organic and porous, actual practical aspects, forms of engagement that are best for even forcing people to listen. And the other part of it is that the MIT statement on free speech has two important parts that work well together, that disagreement and offense are not a basis for silencing, right, but also that MIT is committed to give a platform and let people voice the disagreement. Right. And I'm wondering if you have ideas for a practical way for that to happen, so people the feeling will move away from it being a power struggle of who's allowed to police speech into voicing the thing and the disagreement.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautifully put. I guess I would emphasize that we want to be. I believe we want to be creating cultures where people see this as a special opportunity to learn from each other. And insofar as their attention can be turned to those issues, the issue about how we might learn together here during this fleeting time on the college campuses, then we've done a lot of that work already. It's easy to turn our attention to other important issues too, but I think there has to be some steady force of winds blowing us to remember how important that is. If we're seeing ourselves as involved in a great adventure on MIT's campus or any other campus to learn and to grow, then it's going to be a natural activation of all the talent around you in this room and beyond will start to occur. If you let people know and remind them that we're with you because we're here to learn, first and foremost, there are things we're going to be learning about justice. There are things that we're going to be learning about history. There are things we're going to be learning about the facts of inequality in our society, of course. But we're here to learn first and foremost. That means don't let the facts that are inconvenient get in the way or come to dominate. It means like find our way through together to take seriously these social kind of questions. So that's part of an answer, I think. And again, it goes back to the ground, as I mentioned before. It goes back to preparing the ground before the things happen. I see so many, we all do, but I see a lot of them in my position. So many incidents happen on college campuses, and all heck breaks loose, and now it's battlefield, and who knows what happened, and the histories get complicated and disagreed, and all kinds of stuff goes on. It's what happens before that that really matters. It what happens before that of preparing the ground. That's where the action is. It's quieter. When you do it well, no one ever hears about it. For years, that group I mentioned at Brown, that student group, they built themselves up to become the largest undergraduate group at Brown, right? They call themselves the Janus Forum. Janus for the Roman god with two faces. They put on events with all kinds of controversial speakers. We never made the news. No one ever got shouted down. We just did it because they quietly built this beautiful thing. That's one of the things with beauty and working with the soil, right? That you don't see the sunflower jumping in your face or whatever the negative sunflower is. You just work the soil and beautiful things grow. That's gardening work. HXA is primarily about culture. We're not about fighting wars with lawyers. We're not about forcing universities to own up to their mistakes. We're about trying to work with people sincerely to encourage these virtues on their campuses. And the campus community of HXA on the MIT campus has just gotten started, but I'm hopeful that they'll have that approach too. And with any luck, we'll be able to encourage some of you to reach out to them, to join them, to teach them, to make them better than they would otherwise have been, to make them the asset to MIT that they might become.
Once again, yes, please.
In your talk, you gave us a model of intellectual arrogance in Sir Isaac Newton. And I'm wondering what examples of intellectual humility we might aspire to, what posters of people who are best practitioners in intellectual humility that are success stories that we might aspire to.
Oh, what a great question. It's funny, all my answers are interior to my own life. I have so vivid in my mind people who I saw who are like that. I can say some of their names, some of them are famous academics, but I don't have a ready set of examples, but we should, of people who are that way. We have examples that we talk about of martyrs to the cause, the usual, that's kind of where our head tends to go because it animates people, but that's even more powerful. And maybe I'll just say I would welcome suggestions from any of you about if you have thoughts about a person who's like that. And I guess the best one would be, I'm starting to go to the social world, right, where I can find them there. But staying in the academic world, that's where we want to find them, right, I think. We can find them all over the place in the wider world. But in the academic setting, is it because people who are like that are so quietly like that we don't notice them? Is it because they don't bang tin pans? They just kind of quietly do this beautiful work? Maybe. But going back to an earlier point someone was making, I think the way our brains work, whether we like it or not, some strong examples like that might do a lot more than all the words that I just said. So thanks for the question. I'm sorry I don't have an answer. If any of you think of one, please send me an email, or think of two, send me emails. I would really appreciate that.
We have about 5 minutes to go, and so I think that we have maybe time for one more question. And
I can be super brief if you want. True, false.
I'll throw you a softball. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your willingness to operate in a very thick space. The journey of DE&I has become more mainstream than ever before in my lifetime, and often intersects issues that are close to my heart and personal experience, but sometimes are labeled as political. What is your advice to professionals who are tasked with advancing equity on college campuses, to avoid having the label of political stamped on their agenda. Thank you.
Wow. Nice. I guess not a softball as he walks away.
More like a grenade.
Is he walking out too? I guess I would make a distinction within the word you used, political and political. About politics, that seems like a powerful and reasonable concept to have at work within DEI. Part of DEI is to call people's attention to the way injustices in our world and our attempt to make these things better. It's a very recent accomplishment and an incredible accomplishment that universities like MIT have become as diverse as they are now. It's one of the most fabulous stories, I think, of the past 50 years. But there's, on the other side of political, so that political process is so important and so relevant, so appropriate. The other side of political is the other one that I mentioned, where it looks like coercive, or it looks like an arrogant view that's not really even mindful that it's just one view among others. It gets kind of wrapped up in it. And one of the things that I worry about and have wondered about from the beginning is the word equity, which in my realm of work in philosophy is one among a cluster of theories of justice. It's a controversial view among philosophers for a whole bunch of reasons I could explain to you. Is DEI committed to a particular view of what justice is? If so, it's probably doing political in the wrong way. So there's something about that, right? I think there's something about recognizing the importance of political struggles, ongoing political struggles, that's fully appropriate within a university. Not as the primary purpose, but as one of the most important things we study, that we need to know the truth about. And then the other thing, which is this thing that's associated with DEI widely, unfortunately, as practiced perhaps, certainly as perceived, of having conclusions and building programs after the fact. That's anti-intellectual, and it's also political in the wrong way. So that's not, I was going to do a true or false answer. I'll do them quickly if you want, but I'll leave it to you.
Well,
Sorry, you should.
it's 29. Is it a quick? Oh, no.
I'll talk to them. I'll talk to myself.
No.
I'll talk to them after.
You know.
I'll talk to them after.
Okay, perfect. Just a quick observation about the DEI conversation. It also strikes me sometimes that we're often not describing the same thing. So what DEI means to some folks isn't necessarily the practice of DEI, at least as practiced by me, as the institutional leader around that. And so I find that the conflicting definitions of it often tear at our ability to be productive around these efforts too. So thank you for your response. So please join me once more in thanking Dr. Tomasi. Thank you. I want to remind you all that this event is a beginning. We have a lot of work to do here at MIT, but none of that's going to move forward unless we're able to make meaningful connections amongst ourselves. And humility is such a key part of that. This is also the beginning in the sense that a few months from now, we're going to do it again, this time with MIT Professor of History, Malik Kashim. Keep an eye out in your email for more information about that one. And I'm hoping that this evening we walk away from this discussion as both students and practitioners of a new value, humility. Thank you again, John.
Thank you. Thank you.